just imagine if a UK council, a group of people elected by a local constituency suddenly then decides, right, we're going to do an impactful boycott against Israel.
Yeah.
No Israeli products in our council. That council could spark a diplomatic dispute between the UK and the Israeli government because the local council of a small constituency has basically damaged the foreign policy of the UK.
It is a bill called the Economic Activity of Public Bodies Bill, and it was passed last month, and it is to try and, not to try, but it is literally going to prevent local authorities from boycotting countries. And the bill mentions only one country, which is Israel specifically. Only mentions one country specifically, and that's Israel, but it would apply to all other countries as well. But this is kind of being viewed very much as a bill to prevent anti-Israel boycotts by public institutions locally, including universities, including local councils. It appears this week there have been reports that the Scottish government could be seeking to veto this bill. Now, if I can just go back and explain what this is then. So the bill has passed in UK Parliament and it is going to get approval when members of Parliament return in September. It needs to get passed by the House of Lords. That is expected to be successful. There have been some voices which want it to be the wording to be changed slightly, but we are expecting this to pass. That is something that CUFI supporters have got behind our letter writing campaign to MPs to back this, and we've been very encouraged by the feedback from members of Parliament who have understood the case that we have presented to them and have agreed that it is the right thing to do. Now, Scotland has to reflect the foreign policy of UK central government. So Westminster is expecting Scotland to basically adopt this as well. However, local authorities, matters relating to local authorities is a devolved matter. And so anyone who's outside of the United Kingdom or unfamiliar with the system here, there are a number of areas, political areas, which have been devolved from central government in London to the Scottish government. And the Scottish government has an autonomy to basically to form its own policies, but not foreign policy. But local authorities, local councils, they can. Now, in this situation, there is something called a consent mechanism under the Sewell Convention. So it's a legislative procedure, and the Scottish government basically receives this UK-wide bill and gives consent to it and implements it. However, they have the power to veto it. And the voices from the SNP, which of course is the ruling party, the party in power in Scottish government, are saying that they are going to be vetoing it. And in this situation, what takes place is that actually the Scottish government can then make recommendations to changing its wording. So the situation as it stands is actually a constitutional dilemma. Really. Why are they doing this? Well, is there an anti-Israel sentiment behind it? They have said that they are that anti-Israel boycotts is not part of their policy. Is it sort of a repeat of what has been historically a little bit of tension in terms of Scottish government not wanting to accept all UK central governments, London, Westminster foreign policy? Is a little bit of that. My opinion is that I think there's a little bit of everything, but I also think they might be wanting to keep their options open for boycotting Israel in the future.
Unfortunately.
That's what I think. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so people listening, like, the UK is made up of 4 countries: England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And so there is a central government, which the UK government in Westminster, London, which oversees all of those countries, but there is some autonomy, as you said, between each country. So Scotland has its own ability to make some of its own laws, and there is sometimes a clash between the UK and Scotland because the SNP is the ruling party in Scotland, and the SNP wants independence from the UK, so it doesn't want any jurisdiction. So I think it's like what you said. I think unfortunately the SNP is more on the left-wing sort of side of politics. A lot of them are anti-Israel, or at least neutral to anti-Israel sort of thing. Hamza Yousaf himself is someone who has come under fire. For example, he was obviously praised as being both the youngest politician to become the leader of Scotland at 37, but he's also the first Muslim. And basically he has tweeted some things said in the past where he has said anti-Israel things. He has family, his wife's family, some of them live in Gaza, for example, so he's very emotionally connected to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. And, he's accused Israel of starving the population of Gaza, which is a lie. We go into that, but anyway, Israel doesn't do that. Killing innocent civilians when actually they've been terrorists, things like that. He's met with Hamas in the past. There's some things where with the leader of the SNP, Hamza Yousaf, he is, you would see him as anti-Israel. Let's put it that way. He doesn't see himself as anti-Israel. He actually sees himself as being quite supportive of Israel. But I think there's some underlying things there that we can look at. One thing with the SNP is they want independence from the UK, and they want to go back to the EU. But actually, the EU has passed a bill which is along the lines of being anti-BDS and anti-boycotts. And actually, the EU labels the BDS movement as a whole as being anti-Semitic. So actually, it's a bit of an odd one when they want to actually go back to the EU.
It is.
When the EU actually has laws against these sorts of things. And yet they've got against it. So I don't know what they're playing at, really.
I mean, I think also we must emphasise the fact that this does not represent the view of the whole of Scottish government.
Yeah, or even the Scottish people at all.
Oh, Scottish people, definitely. I think it's very important to stress that we're talking about the SNP, which is the, which, as I say, is the ruling party, majority party. But a Scottish Conservative member of Scottish Parliament, Jackson Carlaw, he said in the news this week, it is utterly disgraceful that the SNP Green government, have not followed suit and backed this bill. These are sensible measures which are backed by our Jewish communities, yet ministers have been missing in standing in solidarity with them by refusing to give the green light to this legislation. The fight against anti-Semitism cannot be half-hearted. SNP/Green ministers should rethink this decision urgently, end quote. The UK government spokesperson has also said, the Scottish government has a record of stoking up grievances by refusing to back many important bills. Simply playing political games with the Sewell Convention will not be acceptable. Britain must have a consistent approach to foreign policy set by the UK government. The UK government source said it was, quote, was disappointing that the SNP-led administration had refused to back the UK-wide bill. They said Britain must have a consistent approach to foreign policy. So, yes, this is, as I said, a slight conflict constitutionally because we've got foreign policy on one hand, we've got local authority matters on the other. We need to pray that this will not scupper the bill in its entirety. I'm not familiar in terms of the absolute pathway in terms of this bill being completely scuppered. I don't understand.
It won't actually happen.
It's more likely. I mean, what they've said is that it's now up to the Scottish government spokesperson has said it's up to Scottish Parliament to consider how to respond to the bill. If it does not give its consent, then in accordance with the Sewell Convention, the UK government should amend the bill to reflect and respect the Scottish Parliament's decision. I think that does actually illustrate. I mean, whilst, of course, Scotland is a very important equal partner in the Union, of course. It's very important to have Scotland's say. In this situation, it does actually illustrate a degree of influence that this left-leaning anti-Israel party does actually have in influencing potentially UK foreign policy.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the fact that the whole wording for the whole of UK could change based on this. I think is quite
it's very interesting.
significant.
Yeah, and it's funny actually that you say that, because it would then be a minority dictating to the majority kind of thing, because ultimately the majority of people in the country have, voted for a government which is now being overridden by a small minority. And also with Scotland, we know that the politics there are slightly skewed, especially within their local elections, because the SNP is campaigning for independence, and therefore they're one of the main parties campaigning for independence. So a lot of people are voting for them just for the independence factor, not for all their policies in, local issues. Actually, they're voting for independence. And so it actually skews like the government of Scotland, unfortunately, to the left, because there's a lot of people probably not even understanding the politics of what the SNP is about outside of the independence issue. And so, so I think it is interesting. I don't think this bill is going to be scuppered completely. I think it's going to, if anything happens, it will be just amended wording, which maybe allows for some sort of leeway within the boycotting of Israel or something, which could then be problematic.
And by the way, some of the objections to the bill have been centered around the freedom to boycott countries that actually the UK already has sanctions on. So
which is
so for example, if we take UK sanctions against Russia and Belarus, local authorities are able, in fact not just able, they're expected to reflect that in their local governance in terms of the sanctions which are in place nationally. So actually, it's important to remember that Israel, of course, rightly, is not sanctioned by UK government.
Yeah, it's a friend of the UK.
So it isn't. It isn't on the same basis as countries which the UK government has identified as being boycottable, sanctioned countries. So actually, those who say, well, no, we want the freedom to be able to do this and that and the other, actually, that is a completely flawed argument. And
it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, just imagine if a UK council, a group of people elected by a local constituency suddenly then decides, right, we're going to do an impactful boycott against Israel, no Israeli products in our council. That council could spark a diplomatic dispute between the UK and the Israeli government, because the local council of a small constituency has basically damaged the foreign policy of the UK.
And that's exactly what the Leicester City Council did in 2014, where it did just that. It had a boycott of Israeli goods. Various goods from what they describe as Israeli settlements. So,
but UK council should not be dictating foreign policy.
Absolutely
and
not.
That's ridiculous.
And one government source, a Scottish government source, said described the bill as too restrictive, and I think that is a indicator that they want to keep their options open in the future. So, if you're listening to this and you live in Scotland, and you have already written to your MP, or if you've not yet written to your MP, your SMP, I should get it right. Is that right?
Yeah, Scottish Member of
MSP.
Parliament.
Member of Scottish Parliament.
That's the one,
Just get it right.
Yep.
Then I would encourage you to please, reach out to them, contact them, say that you've heard this reported in the news that Scottish Government might be vetoing the Westminster Bill, and persuade them not to. Please use your own words. But if you're living in Scotland, then I would particularly call upon you to please follow this through. And thank you, of course, to everyone who's joined our campaign in raising a voice in support of Israel, because this is an action that is in support of Israel. This anti-Israel boycott is something that will bless Israel by making sure that the UK, doesn't align itself with those who are trying to divest, those who are trying to delegitimize the state of Israel through falsehood and through lies. So it is really very important. And so by supporting Christians United for Israel, you are helping us to do that and helping us to be effective here in the UK, in Parliament, through our advocacy.
One thing to add to that is, if people who are listening want to have a real impact on British politics, this is something you can do, which is having a real impact. Like, thousands of CUFI supporters have sent emails to their politicians. Those politicians have responded. Westminster, in response to that campaigning, have approved this bill and been very supportive of it. And so our supporters have actively encouraged their Member of Parliament to support this bill. It has gone through Westminster. It's just now we need to get it through the final hurdle, which is through the Scottish Parliament. So, yeah.
And actually, we've seen some of the replies from Members of Parliament. And some of the replies to us have actually been very similar. The wording has been very similar to the statements that we've been issuing, or our supporters have been issuing to the MPs. So actually, it does filter through, and that's exactly why we do what we do. We want to try and give MPs, who are very busy people, who have lots of matters to deal with, the framework in order to understand the argument and to be able to present the case. Not just returning it back to us who are pro-Israel, but actually stating that case to others who might be writing to them as well against it. So to see some of that filtering through is really encouraging, and that's because of our supporters who are actively engaged and helping us in these campaigns by writing to the MP.
And people have sent us emails with their responses. We've had a lot of communication between our supporters, and also I want to point out, this is frontline defense of Israel. You love Israel, you're defending Israel, get involved, because it's a great way to actually see the work in action.
Absolutely.
Putting our faith in action.